guys.
Okay. Okay, so we're in closed session. We are recording. Okay, so back in our only agenda item for closed session this evening is further discussion on the Willow Springs property. Back in September, the board discussed the CASARDA enrollment report and authorized Eris from Franzik to prepare some draft terms and conditions for a potential sale, which is really the primary purpose of tonight, is to be able to talk through that, ask questions, discuss those draft terms and conditions. And then the secondary part of that, of the discussion, is I want to give the board an update on some really recent developments that happened as of Friday, which was a conversation I had with the Pleasantdale School District 107. So we'll handle the draft terms and conditions first, and then I'll give the board an update on that, and we'll be looking for some direction. So
just a quick question. For the closed session agenda, is that just our agenda, or is that also what the public sees?
No, that's just our agenda.
Oh,
that's
okay.
just our agenda.
I was wondering the same thing.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's just
thank
it.
you.
Yeah.
I was just wondering,
Yeah.
not that
Yeah.
because I didn't know if on the public sees just like maybe a long version of like discussion of closed sale or whatever.
Right now, that's all. That's all just for the board. Okay, so Eris, do you want to just kind of give an overview of both the resolution that you drafted plus the terms and conditions, and then we can see what questions the board has around that?
Sure. So in order to initiate the sale of the property, if that's the direction the board goes, you would pass a resolution, and it would have to make a finding that the board has determined that the site is no longer necessary for the school district, and it would be in the best interest of the school district to dispose of the property. And then there's really kind of two paths you can follow. One is via a sealed bid, and the other is through a public auction. The terms are almost identical. The only paragraph that's really different is I teed this up as sort of a sealed bid process. Paragraph 1 would look a little different if it was done as a public auction. There's no magic one way is better than the other. There's pros and cons, and either one would be right in this instance, but I've had a lot of luck with clients using the sealed bid process for some larger properties, so that's the way I went. But certainly there are good arguments to use the public auction. Certainly the one advantage the public auction brings, the biggest advantage, is that you have the potential for a bidding war. So that would be something that you don't get publicly through the sealed bid process. You sort of get it going in, though. If you've got a decent number of bidders, these are sophisticated buyers who sort of are all in the same business of developing industrial real estate. I think you have a good opportunity for one of them to say, hey, we really want this thing. And looking at the minimum bid, and there's nothing magic about $65 million either. I just wanted to put a number in there. I could have put $68 million, which was Bill Enright's appraisal. The board could put any number it wants in the second section. I just use 65 as sort of a plug. But both options are good. And so I don't want to say that just because I use sealed bid process, that's better. But I kind of needed to use one. So that's the one I went with.
So, Eris, one question. You mentioned the biggest advantage of a public auction is that bidding war. What are some downsides to a public auction?
Well, I don't know that the downsides would be nobody shows up. That's the big one. You know what I'm saying? Here, I think we're going to get bidders. We're going to get Bridge and Duke and Centerpoint and Dermody and Brennan Investment Group and others that I'm not even aware of. But there is a whole universe of industrial developers who would find this property attractive. You know, if you drive up and down 294 or look around in McCook, in Elk Grove, other places, that's where they're doing business. Franklin Park, anywhere around the south end of the airport, along Irving Park Road, if you ever drive along there, where they expanded the footprint of O'Hare, that's just loaded with brand new industrial buildings, similar to what would likely be developed here.
So what are the advantages of a sealed bid then, Eris?
Yeah, so what I think are the advantages is if you've got sophisticated buyers who are going to come in with their best number, They're going to sharpen their pencils up front. And I think here, given that you probably are going to have a decent number of bidders, and they're going to want this thing, you would get good numbers out of the box. And so I think there's no right answer. Like I said, I think it's a more controlled process with the sealed bid, in the sense of you get all these envelopes, you get these checks with the earnest money, you open them all up one at a time, you lay them on the table, and then you don't have to go with the highest bidder. If you look at the terms and conditions, there are other factors in there that the board can look at, such as, you know, the nature of the development, the amount of new property EAV that's going to be developed, that kind of stuff. Future tax revenues that will be generated. So I think you're going to be good either way you go with this.
Well, and this is Julie Aris. What you just described to me is the biggest advantage of a sealed bid process, and I just want to make sure I understand. If we were to, which is that the board still retains full authority to make the ultimate decision. If it were a public
limiting
auction,
language. Yep.
Okay, sorry.
So, Julie, this language that I put in there, and this is at the top of the second page of the terms and conditions, and let me find it. Seller may consider the bid price, future property tax revenues, and new property EAV likely to be generated by the development, and any other factors. That language would be in whether you did it as a sealed bid or a public auction.
Oh, okay, that was going to be my question.
Yeah.
Okay.
What somebody gets coming out of this process, whether it's done by sealed bid or by public auction, is they then get the opportunity for the board to approve the purchase. So they sign that memorandum of sale, and then at your next board meeting, we'd have to set this up so to be a board meeting within 10 days. The board actually approves the sale, signs the memorandum, and at that point, the terms and conditions essentially become the contract or the agreement, which is how I've defined it here. But those factors that give the board the opportunity to perhaps reject the highest bid coming out of either process are going to be there, whichever path you follow.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
What about with the terms and conditions? Like hypothetically, if somebody were to come in, if we stayed in the sealed bid process, and somebody were to come in and give us an offer that was not as high as somebody else, but had some provisions in there that the board really liked and wished that we would have, like, maybe we don't even understand, but somebody comes in and details some sort of community improvements or something, and then we're like, well, this is not the highest offer, we think we could get more, but we would love to make these type of community provisions part of this deal. Do we have any ability to do that at that point, or no?
Yeah, so what would happen is you would, at the close of the bidding or the auction, the highest bidder you'd sign off on the memorandum of sale with that highest bidder, even if they weren't your ideal high bidder. And let's say the number 2 bidder had these features that you liked. The board at its meeting could reject the high bidder, just like in a sense, for any reason or no reason at all, you don't have to take the highest bidder, but I do think you'd have to have a good explanation why you didn't, because given the dollars involved, if somebody's going to pay 65, 68, 70, 80 million dollars for this land, assuming it's the full, 80 acres, that's enough. If they get their bid, they're the high bidder and they don't get selected, we have to be real careful with that. And I think here they're all going to be coming at it from the same perspective, which is maximizing the number of buildings and the amount of square footage they can put on it. It's possible that they might come in with some other features, but that's the kind of stuff really that the village would work out with them as a condition of getting the zoning change and or any variations or special use permits they needed. They might put conditions on those things to get you the things you're talking about now.
Okay. Yeah, my angle was actually, the angle that I was trying to ask the question from was, we want the highest bidder, but the highest bidder didn't include some provisions that, like, the third bidder did. So do we have the ability to go back and negotiate? And I'm guessing we don't with this process.
I don't think you do. I think you want to keep it clean and not muddy the waters that way. You don't want to invite some losing bidder to file a lawsuit claiming that something was going on that was not a pure sale of the property, either by sealed bid or by public auction. If there are things that you want from this development, we're better off just putting them in the terms and conditions now. I don't know what that would look like above and beyond the highest price and sort of a capable bidder that's, this is almost a year-long process between the bidding or the auction and then the final closing. So you want somebody who's got the wherewithal to close on this thing.
Yeah.
This makes me think too, and I'm sure we'll get to this, I'm getting ahead of ourselves, but I think it's going to be critical in the PR side of this to explain our role and the village's role. The village is the one that can put more parameters on how it truly gets developed than we do.
Yeah. Right.
That's going to be important.
Yeah, because I also just I know that we're here looking at for the good and of the school and the district and finances, but do we not care once this does go public, whatever opposition that does come and what they may want, those people who live in and around there, if they know if for instance that this is likely, that then maybe there are some things that they may have concerns to. Could you also think about, is it then in our role that we just don't care and that we're going forward? I'm just understanding because those are our constituents too in our base, but I understand for the greater good, but that kind of ramification.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's why do we put conditions in there?
But we don't know though. We wouldn't know yet until this is all kind of moved forward, and then it becomes public.
I will say this. I think it's safe to say, and this is something this board has talked about since this spring. As we take every step and we get closer and closer to this becoming public, this is going to be intense. Mm-hmm. It's going to be highly critical. So that's why meaning the board's going to get criticism on this. Highly charged, and the board's going to get criticism. So that's why I will say again, doing this methodically and making sure that we've got every step, and really this has to be a board decision on what we do with this. So I think it's, Michael, you make a good point.
And let me just add a little bit too. I think the farther the board drifts from maximizing value for the taxpayers of Lyons Township High School District 204, the more you are getting away from what the whole school code concept of selling school district real estate is at. The process is set up to get maximum value for a school district when it makes the determination that property is not necessary and it's in the best interest of the school board to sell it. And the whole process of the entitlements, the approvals, the zoning change, everything that has to be done to make this into whatever it's going to be, those are all Village of Willow Springs issues. And they're going to, they have requirements that they have to satisfy too. Whatever their zoning code requires for building setbacks and height limitations and buffering and landscaping, those are things that that's kind of their job, is to make sure that to the extent possible, the landowner's rights are protected with respect to what they're buying, and neighboring properties owners' rights are not trampled on excessively as part of the process.
That makes me feel better. That it is, because those are the types of things that I would, was thinking that we could potentially ask. But I understand entirely where you're coming from. That the code, that if we're deeming it unnecessary for the use of our district and the school things, that's where we probably have to stay.
Right. So okay, I get that. So, but the other thing I think that I would want to understand is, okay, while this current board, and we don't know what is going to happen in April, will make this decision, when does it become final that, like, if there's a change that a new group comes in and the majority changes, can that be overturned, or where does it go that this board is the one that is making this decision and it's like kind of binding?
Yeah, like where can we kick off the process prior to end of April? And does
You
that make
definitely
it
can.
final? Okay.
Yeah, so, once the board, let's say the board were to approve the sale of the property in January or February, hypothetically. So the first thing that has to happen, you would approve this resolution, you would set the date for the auction or the sealed bid, and you would direct the administration to publish 3 consecutive weeks in a newspaper of general circulation, the form of notice that was attached as an exhibit to the resolution. So notice is published 3 times, so that's 3 weeks. The following week would probably set up the sealed bid opening or the public auction process. And then you have your high bidder at that point. So within 10 days thereafter, the board has a meeting, the board approves the contract. At that point, it's a contract. And so the board takes a step back, and then the high bidder, which is now the buyer under the contract, begins their process. So, the first thing we talk about is inspection of the real estate and the feasibility period. So they have X number of days to do all the investigations they need to do. Look for Indian burial grounds and check the suitability of the soil to bear the weight of the trucks and these types of buildings. Do borings, make sure no one's been dumping out there, that there aren't sort of unknown underground creeks that they need to account for. And then once that's done, then they get to the approval process, which they'll be going through sort of all along, but the approval process is around 210 days. So that's basically 7 months for them to work with the village, go through the planning process. The step one is sit down with the village. And if the village tells them there is not a snowball's chance in Hades that you will get this done, they may walk away and simply say, we'll take our money back in terms of the earnest money. But if the planning department says, if you do X, Y, and Z, I think you'll get you'll have a fair hearing. Then they would go to the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission holds a series of public hearings, has a lot of public comment, in my estimation. They'll get people commenting, and then they give a recommendation. And then the recommendation, favorable or unfavorable, goes to the village trustees, and they then will either approve the plan or they'll reject it. And if it's approved, that means the bidder, the buyer now, has gotten the approvals they need, and they can break ground and start on moving earth and building buildings. So to answer the original question, it will be a contract. If you act in January or February, a contract will be in place before the end of April. Frankly, even if you acted at your March meeting, it would likely be there'd be a contract in place, because you're talking board action, 3 weeks. The 4th week, you have the bid or auction. Maybe not the March meeting, but certainly January, February.
Eris, when you mentioned the approval or rejection from the village, what happens if it's rejected from the village?
Yeah, so if the village shoots them down, let's say they get a negative recommendation from the Plan Commission. So normally what happens then is the applicants to the municipality will not go forward with having the village board approve or reject, because they're pretty confident it's going to be rejected. So they normally will kind of hit the reset button, go back, talk to the planning department, see if they can make some changes to the plan that would be acceptable, then go to the Plan Commission again, and then go to the City Council if they can successfully get past the Plan Commission. And if they can't do any of those things, they would get their money returned to them. And let me just look. So what we've got is at the end of the feasibility period, which is that 120 days when they determine that the property is structurally capable of doing what they want to do with it, then $100,000 of the earnest money becomes non-refundable. And then at some point during the approval process, if they pull the trigger and decide we can't do this, they sort of pull the ripcord, I should say, they would then get their earnest money back, except the $100,000 that had become non-refundable.
Okay, thanks.
Iris, is the $500,000 earnest money pretty much market in relationship to the $65 million floor?
You know, I wasn't sure what to use as earnest money. I felt it was market based on similar deals that I've done for very high value properties. I actually asked a couple people in the office, what do you think? And they all felt 500,000 was in the ballpark. But kind of like choosing between the sealed bid or the public auction, it's not a magic number, and we can make it more if you want to make it more.
Maybe that's something to think about.
Yeah.
And my other question was around the I haven't matched up the pins and parcels to anything, but is the $65,000, sorry, 65 million, apologies, related to all, just our ownership portion, or the part that's also been kind of carved out for the Pleasantdale Park District?
No, that is only District 204 property.
Okay,
So the parcel
very
numbers.
Clean. Okay.
Yeah, there's two separate pins, and if you look at a couple of the documents that Brian had sent around, you see the notches. There's two rectangles. Those are Park District properties with separate pins.
Yep. Okay. And then I think for the board, and I know this was part of what you guys were asking, are we, what floor or minimum price are we not excited about, feeling is appropriate, where we would still transact, even if it's below the appraisal, or as Eris mentioned earlier, should it be the appraisal? So meaning the appraised value, it sounds like, is $68 million. If the highest bid we get is 67, and we set the floor at 68, we, I think, can't entertain the 67, and would we, which is a sort of a question, and would we feel that we missed out on an opportunity for that slight differential? Like, where's our tolerance level for how much below appraised value we would want to transact?
And let me throw one other thing out there: is Bill Enright's appraisal at $68 million was for the entire property. He makes that comment within his appraisal. I'm including two properties that are owned by the Park District. But if you do sort of a prorated deduct, roughly speaking, 9 to 10 of the 80 acres are Park District property. So let's call that 10% just to keep the math easy. If you take Bill's appraisal at $68 million, you take 10% of that, that's 6.8. So 68 million minus 6.8, your equal number appraisal would be 61.2. That would be equating Enright's appraisal to what the district actually owns.
And what, remind us, what was the offer that we...
Bridge was $65 million for everything, but keep in mind, when they came in to meet with us, they were not aware the Park District owned those two pieces. And then their president, or the guy who runs their Chicago office, said, that's fine. We'll prorate the value to what LT actually owns. So at least back in May or June when we had the meeting, that's what he was saying.
It's probably a good time to talk about.
So yeah, can I switch gears for 1 second and just kind of give an update? First of all, so Allison and Julie, you don't have this hard copy in front of you, but we put together packets, which I want to do for each of our discussions around this property is just, I want to collect these folders and keep updating them, bringing them back, because I think we want to be careful of having documents floating out there. So on the left side of your folder are all the previous meeting documents. On the right side of the folder are the draft resolution, the draft terms and conditions, and then I also put a timeline in here just to kind of keep us on the same page with what's happened so far. What I see is a couple next steps coming up if the board is interested in taking those next steps. But the big thing that's happened over the last couple of days is last Wednesday night, I had known that the school district, Pleasantdale School District 107, their superintendent had some very preliminary conversations with the Park District. And the conversations relate to their desire, the school district's desire, to use the Park District land to build an early childhood center that would also double as administrative offices for the park district. Okay, so keep in mind, the school district has no land in this game, but they want to use the park district's land to build a early childhood center. So Dave Palzette, their superintendent, sent this to me on Friday, inquiring whether or not our board would be interested in discussing a land swap with the park district. So if you look at this document here that says existing park district property, that's the current state of the land. So it's basically, Eris, did you say 8 or 9 acres? I thought it was 7 acres. Is it?
I thought it was more like 9, Brian, but I think we can roughly say, kind of without sharpening our pencils too much, it's about 10% of the total. But
okay.
I thought it was more like 8 or 9.
So the park district has that 9 acres, which is on the east center part of the parcel. If you look directly west of there, you can see the school building that's there. And in between the school building and our property, the park district has that baseball field and that little park just north of that. So now change to this document that says Park District Option 1. And again, I can't stress this enough. This is coming from the school district who doesn't own the land. Okay? So they're saying that potentially the park district would be interested in a land swap where we would get their parcel and they would take that piece that's outlined on this one that says Park District Option 1, which is on the southwest corner of the property. Their Option 2, if that doesn't work, would be the third document that I'm sharing with you, and that is just to move their parcel directly west to where it adjoins the baseball field and the park. So I think the real important question from the board is the board interested in discussing that idea? Because what I would do simply is I need to get back to Pleasantdale School District and say, nope, the board's not interested in that, or yes, the board is interested in discussing that, and then that would probably involve some meetings and things like that.
And what would that do to the potential timeline of the, because it seems like then we would have to get that all taken care of.
So Eris, Don just asked, if the board was interested in exploring a land swap with the park district, what would that do to the overall timeline? Because that's a whole other process would have to go first, right?
Right, and it's actually a much shorter, more truncated process. So if a school district or any public body is going to sell land to another public body, there's no requirement to do an auction or have a sealed bid process. You can just enter into an agreement with that public body and do the land sale. Now, there's also a section in the Illinois School Code allowing for an exchange of properties. The problem with that section, and it's 5-23, is that it requires the school board taking the new property, what's referred to as the substitutional site, and making a finding that that substitutional site is suitable for a school. And if you're going to sell this land, you're going to be making a finding that it's not necessary and it's in the best interest that you sell it. So I think we'd want to go under the Local Government Property Transfer Act, which is the first one I talked about, where we would simply enter into an agreement. LT would buy the land that is currently owned by the Park District. LT would sell to the Park District the land that they're looking at, either Option 1 or Option 2, and it would be very straightforward. It's done via an intergovernmental agreement. I can tell you right now that I have 3 similar transactions going, one with a school district selling land to a park district, and 2 with school districts buying land from municipalities. So it's a very common way to do it. And, you really just need to draft up the IGA, have each of the public bodies approve it, you have a closing, and it's done.
What would give an estimate of timeline from start to finish on a process like that?
So let's say we decided today to do it. Either I or the Park District Attorney would prepare an IGA, and I have great template IGAs, so I would offer to do it because it would be very efficient. And then we would get you a resolution, and the Park District Attorney would get his client a resolution, and the transferee entity has to approve the resolution first, and then the transferor, the seller entity. Here we'd actually have a couple things going on because you're going to wear both hats. you're going to be a seller of some land and a buyer of others, so the IGA would have to be tweaked a little bit to account for that, but that's what it would look like. So school board approves, park district approves, we get deeds together and work with the title company and have the conveyance and record the deeds, and the map would then look like option 1 or option 2.
But how long how long might that take? Like,
if you guys just did monthly meetings, it would take longer. If the board said, hey, we're willing to schedule a special meeting or two to get this done, you could accelerate the process dramatically. So I would say it would take 6 weeks total. If you decided you could do one special meeting to expedite the process, I would say from start to finish, it would be 6 weeks.
Do we know, it sounds like the way you described the communication was that this is kind of a new burgeoning idea for District 107.
Yep.
Do we even know that the Park District is going to entertain the idea of doing this?
No. I mean, I would never confirm that, but I know that the superintendent from 107 and their board has already had conversation with the Park District.
I mean, it just seems like we could potentially, if we are going to move forward in selling this property, that we're potentially jumping through a lot of additional hoops that I don't know if it impacts our situation or not, positively or negatively,
So-
for something we don't even know if it's going to happen.
So here's one thing I am doing. I want to get some feedback from Bridge Industrial on what that would do to the value of the land from their perspective. Like, at first blush, I mean, but that's an important part of the feedback.
Right, but
Does it, not seeing what the property looks like or what option 1 or option 2 looks like, does it look more attractive? Like, does it not come into I know how it is now, it's kind of right in the middle of the...
It makes it it would make the District 204 parcel more contiguous.
Okay.
I remember Bridge, sorry, go ahead, Allison.
Well, I guess the biggest concern is, Brian, you had mentioned they're looking for the land swap so that they can build an early childhood center. It gets me real concerned that we would be doing this land swap for an early childhood center and then put a big, huge...
right, industrial warehouse with trucks coming through. Like, does that make sense?
My concern would be that, one, it would prevent, like they would give, if you're going to go before the board to have things rezoned, one is more favorable than the other, especially when you're going into a PR aspect of this, that people would love an early childhood center versus a big industrial center. And I know that when we met with them, and they presented to us, one of the concerns was where they were talking about redistrict. And I don't know the area well enough, but they were talking about where they would have trucks coming in and out of with traffic flow, and you now have more traffic coming to this. So my concern would be that it could diminish our value because it might hurt on the zoning to having it be rezoned. And two, depending upon the placement of it, could also be impactful on the traffic flow, which was a concern.
just the fact that this has already been asked, we're going to have to, that's going to be another layer, again, from a communication standpoint. Somebody is going to say, well, we could have had this. Like, that will happen.
Yep.
Well, could have had what part?
Like an early childhood center.
Oh.
Like if we say no, let's see what happens with the sale because we don't want the conflicting interest or what have you. At some point in all of those hearings and everything, somebody from the school district or the park district is going to say the school board wouldn't entertain an early childhood center. Instead, they just put the big logistics.
Right. So then do you just go through and have, like, we go through and with like kind of our plans of things, but then I just don't understand. I can't see that you would build, because they theoretically don't know, but that you would build a childhood center where you're going to have like all of these like monster trucks and coming through in traffic, and then now there's a childhood center. That doesn't make sense.
Because it might not be cohesive with the zoning would be my concern. I don't know. I'm not really a zoning attorney.
It's pretty suspicious that I don't know if we've ever been asked about our land until we're in talks about the land. I don't know. It seems interesting.
No, we've been asked about the land repeatedly.
Yeah.
Oh, we have. Okay.
Oh, yeah,
okay.
all
So,
the time.
so don't seem suspicious,
The
Julie.
park
Okay.
district has I know the park district approached Tim when he was superintendent and Tom. UPS approached them back in 2012. You know, this has been a constant. There's been a lot of it. I mean, in my year and a half already, it's been Bridge that has approached us. Now the park district, now the school district, actually it's the park district through the school district. So yeah, this has been a constant thing.
When you met with Bridge and looked at the existing properties, if the park district were not going to entertain selling their portion of the property, was that a concern for them to move forward with the deal?
I remember them saying that's when we could think about a land swap and putting their parcel somewhere else and trying to have something contiguous. But Brian, you were in that meeting, right?
Yeah, I vividly remember them saying that it was irrelevant. It
didn't affect it. Yeah, let me make a couple comments on that. So either certainly under option 2, and I think under option 1, the access point for the early childhood center would be along School Avenue off of German Church Road. So it would really be, you'd be approaching it away from where the truck traffic is. And my recollection from our May or June meeting was that Bridge said that the traffic would be coming into the complex off of Willow Springs Road.
Yeah,
and what they do, right, and they basically, when these guys, once the facility's open, they are able to inform Apple and Google and everybody else that here's what you use for coordinates to get to the facility. So the truckers type in Willow Springs Complex, and they're directed down certain routes to get to the property off of 55 or 294. And then the other thing to keep in mind, and this is certainly more long-term, but there is a strong push to make a lot of these long-haul trucks and delivery trucks electric trucks in the not-too-distant future. So concerns about diesel exhaust may be mitigated with the passage of time. I mean, that's sort of Pollyanna-ish, but it's also what's been talked about. You hear about Amazon ordering all these new vehicles that are EV, that sort of thing.
The benefit, what Pleasantdale School District told me was that the reason that they are interested in option 1 is because it creates a loop off of German Church Road from School Avenue through that back to German. So right now, buses and traffic goes in on School and out on School, and it's not a real ideal traffic pattern. So that's why when I look at this, my first thought was, why would their option 2 not be their option 1? But the reality is their option 1 creates a loop that allows school traffic to come in and go out, not the same way.
I also like that it backs up to some of these houses here too. So I mean, I don't know. We can't control so much of this after we do the sale.
Right.
We can't control what the zoning is going to be and all of that. But if we were going to move swap, at least that creates like a corner that's a buffer for those homes in that school, instead of having it randomly on the other side on Willow Springs Road.
Are we best suited to just to run our process knowing that Pleasantdale Park District will be contacted by Bridge at some point pretty soon, or maybe remind me on that. Like, how is it not better for us to just move forward with what we're doing and let Pleasantdale Park District decide if they want to take $5 million in an auction for their piece of it, or do some swap with the school, or somehow give the land to the school, or negotiate at that time for a swap? Like, are we out of order sequence?
I think on the surface, it might the land swap might create more value for our land because it would be contiguous. That would be the first at least thought, but I certainly would want to get feedback on that. The second part, I'm wondering out loud if there isn't some value in the Park District approaching us on this versus us approaching them.
Yeah.
I want to be
when
mindful.
This becomes a public idea, when this becomes a public idea, you will be approached by the Park District, I think, because otherwise they're going to be left out in terms of their notch, which now opens onto Willow Springs, and they they may have long-term plans to be connected to that White Buffalo Park. It would go from a small park to a pretty good-sized park. So.
So we got 2 minutes left before we have to reconvene. I guess again, the really important question is, is the board interested in, if the park district approaches us, is the board interested in having that discussion? Or should the answer be not at this time?
My final question to Eris was going to be, Eris, from a legal and advisement standpoint, from council standpoint, do you feel us making any moves with park districts sooner than we would to put this property would hurt us either optically or legally?
I'm not sure it would hurt you legally. I think there's a risk of getting bogged down in look at how much deliberation and thoughtful thinking is going into your process. Once you loop in the park district and possibly D107, you're adding multiples of months to the process. And you guys have been talking about this for 5 months now, maybe a little bit longer. So I think it would add a lot of delay to the process. And just being practical about it, if the board were to say, hey, we're moving forward, it kind of calls the question, and if any deal is going to be had with the park district, it's going to come together quickly rather than a lot of navel gazing and, hey, hold off. So those are, legally, I don't think you're disadvantaged. I would definitely want to do what Brian suggested and see if option 1 or option 2 is more value enhancing or value diminishing in terms of just from the development of the site. My guess is the bridge is going to be kind of agnostic on that, but they may say, you know what, option 1 is really better for us. We'd pay more for that than we'd pay for option 2, so at least you know at that point.
Okay. So with that, any concerns with me getting feedback from Bridge on what the impact that would have? And then number 2, indicating, at least back to the school district, that there's interest in a discussion.
But I like what Eris just said, if I understood him properly, was to go ahead with our process, start getting it out there, and then that puts kind of the notice to the park district and District 107. It kind of gives us some negotiating
leverage,
power that if you want to do this, you're
have
going to have to move on it
quickly.
quickly.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if we are going to do this, I think we should do it in a manner that it becomes contract before the new board election. I don't know how you all feel. That's just
because it could be totally overturned.
I agree.
And or flipped somehow.
yeah. So I would hate to put this on delay
Wait too
and
long.
make it
Right. If you're going to ask all these people
Yeah.
and these bids to come through from a professionalism standpoint, and
Yeah.
so
You're right.
I mean, to that point, the timeline still lays out that way, that we would still be looking at a mid-January, early February resolution, because that's when we'd have the facilities plan, we'd have the PR plan. Like, we're still kind of tracking towards that January, February timeline.
But
Which
if
then-
you tell the park district that we're open to it, without us going forward in our process, does that potentially slow us down? Does that potentially, change things to say, well, they were open to it, but now they're just moving ahead? Versus
That's
if we
the
move
decision,
ahead,
right?
and then
Like-
that opens up the conversation.
Should we? I mean, so should we should the board tell the park district we're not interested in right now until we get further along?
I would rather do that because I do worry about it. I mean, I think like based upon the meeting that we were in and everything, I don't think they're going to care where the land is. I just worry about it impacting zoning, and we have no deal if we can't get it zoned. And I wouldn't want them to go first to it to have it zoned. I mean, that's my 2 cents.
And then if once we make this public, if they want to talk about it in an expedited fashion, we would have the ability to do that, right? On that end.
But I think I just worry about the zoning aspect because we could do all of this work and then the village says no on zoning
Absolutely.
because we sold this.
Yep.
Are we doing our best fiduciary duty because we sold this out and did a swap, not sold it, but did a swap, and that therefore impacts our zoning because, I don't know, maybe there's something crazy that you can't have an industrial thing next to a child care center. So had we not done this, we could have had it but for that.
All right.
So that,
I'm with you, Jill.
Do we have enough information to go on? Because we've got to.
so I think
Yeah. Well, so what I'm hearing is get feedback from Bridge on this, but right now we're not interested. The board's not interested in discussing the land swap.
I would agree.
with
Yeah,
Park
I would too.
Park District.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
That's all you needed from us at this point?
Yep.
We don't need to talk about the 65 versus
And you were gonna check on the
68
tower
or sealed bid
committee.
versus auction?
I don't
This
believe
point?
so because I think that those will be decisions we can make when we're ready to
Okay.
actually get this going. I mean, to me, I still think it's really important that when the board decides to adopt the resolution and make this a public matter, that facilities plan has to be right next to it, as well as the enrollment report. And we're not there yet. So
Right.
Great.
I think I think the board has some time to decide final numbers, finalize the terms and conditions and things like that. Okay.
All right, great.
Okay.
Thanks, Eris. Thanks, Julian.
All set, yeah, no, have a good meeting, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care
you.
now.
Thanks, Eris.
Bye.
Thanks, Eric.
Bye. You're welcome, bye.
Bye.
Okay, Julie and Allison, you can stay
Hang on.
on and we'll move right into open session here.
Yeah, if we can have a motion then to adjourn
Okay.
into closed session. So move back into open. Wait, sorry, who said that?
Jill.
Jill, and then who second?
Second.
Jill and Jill. Thank you.
I like to keep it easy.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks,
Aye.
guys. You guys stick around.
Do you want these?